And the whole idea of unifying, becoming one with God, is unifying with that divinity and becoming that divinity. Is it any wonder that the later Christian councils who rejected the idea of deification threw out the books of Enoch out of the canon of the Bible? You did know that in the Abyssinian canon of the Bible, the book of Enoch is just before the book of Job. It is Scripture in some canons of Christians. Not in Western Christianity. But is Western Christianity the only Christianity? Not at all. The books of Enoch have made a comeback, and it's powerful medicine for those who wish to understand what is the whole point of all of this. What is the point of life? The point of life, through Jesus Christ, following the Christian tradition, is to become one with Him. That's what He taught in John 17. That was His prayer to the Father. The unification of the human with the divine and becoming the divine. I believe God has that power and capability. Apparently Christianity doesn't. But as a part of Christianity, in Mormonism, I believe that doctrine. The books of Enoch come out now and say, this is the fascinating implications of these books. Very fascinating materials. Now, Leonore Leet, again, phenomenal text. The Universal Kabbalah. This was her last book she printed before she died. She didn't live to see it printed, which was too bad. 2004. She says on page 194, you can see this is a huge, brawling book. It's pretty sensational. Way deep. Phenomenal materials on the Kabbalah. Page 194. There is a Kabbalistic tradition that at the highest level of mystical ascent, the face one sees on the throne will be one's own. Thus, Abraham Abulafia, the great Kabbalistic master of meditation, writes, when an individual completely enters the mystery of prophecy, he suddenly sees his own image standing before him. And he proceeds to support this claim by quoting from a work of Moshe of Narbonne that refers to this earlier tradition. Moshe says, when the sages teach that the prophets liken a form to its creator, they mean that they liken the form which is in the prophet's own soul to God. It is thus written, over the form of the throne there was a form like an image of a man, Ezekiel 1:26. These forms and images exist in the soul of the prophet. The ultimate step of mystical ascent is reflected in the traditions surrounding the central figure of the Shi'ur Koma, Metatron, the angelic prince of the presence who is called Youth, Na'ar. Though subservient to the Holy One, blessed is He, blessed be He, Metatron is called the Lesser Yahweh, and is seated upon a throne, even though only similar to the throne of glory, where He rules as prince over the other heavenly hosts. Most significantly, this intermediary between God and the creation, whose size is the whole of the created world, is not simply a supernatural being, but the transfigured form of the biblical figure of Enoch. Seated on this throne, this heavenly throne, this is the formerly human body that has become a lesser form of the deity. But He has become divinized. Now then, Alexander Galitzin, in a paper given at the International Conference on the Dead Sea Scrolls, this was in St. Andrews, Scotland, in 28th of June, 2001. He has a paper called Recovering the Glory of Adam, Divine Light, Traditions in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Christian Ascetic Literature of the 4th Century Syro-Mesopotamia. what he says is very interesting. On page 7, he's talking about Macarius and his various homilies in the 4th century of the Christian era. So this is, the books of Enoch date to anywhere from 200 BC to 100 AD, depends which ones you're looking at. Apparently this tradition was at least carried on for several hundred years before the councils of the church got rid of them, because Macarius' recognition is understanding of this tradition. Golitzin says, light and glory, that is doxa, are for Macarius essentially equivalent. They appear often in his homilies. What is striking is his insistence that they are truly divine, they are uncreated. Second, he is on at least 2 occasions in the Discourses 17 and Discourse 58 of Collection 1. He's quite specific that the light is neither a metaphor nor a purely subjective illumination of the intellect. This is not spiritualized light and glory, in other words, for Macarius. He's taking it literally. Neither is it a product of the pneuma, but a divine and essential light. This appears in the soul, and it shines more than the light of the sun. The image of the heavenly man of Paul, St. Paul, in 1 Corinthians 15:49 reflects this tradition, as well as the body of his, Christ's glory, of Philippians 3:21. At the beginning of the first homily, in the collection of the 50 spiritual homilies, he provides a paraphrase of Ezekiel chapter 1, and then he offers his interpretation. Here's how Macarius understands Ezekiel in the 4th century. The prophet truly and assuredly saw what he saw, but this vision also suggested something else, a mystery truly hidden from eternity, and made manifest in the epiphany of Christ. For Ezekiel beheld the mystery of the soul that is going to receive its Lord and become his throne of glory. Since the soul, which has been illuminated by the beauty of his, that is Christ's, ineffable glory, after having prepared itself for him as a throne, a cathedra, and a dwelling place, becomes all light and all face and all eye. It is the soul, then, for Macarius, which is the throne and the temple and the dwelling place of God. All face and all eye point also to the Hayot, the living creatures, which Macarius goes on also to identify with the soul, together with the Merkabah itself. He says, the 4 living creatures which carry the chariot were also carrying a type of the 4 governing facilities of the soul. I mean the will, the conscience, the intellect, and the power to love. For through them the chariot of the soul is steered, and upon them God takes his rest. So Macarius was understanding also that this divinity and the attributes of the divinity are in our souls. Now, once again, Andrei Orlov, in a paper that was published in the Seminar Papers 39 for the Society of Biblical Literature in 2000, this is on Exodus 33 on God's face, a lesson from the Enochic tradition. He's describing the whole narrative about God's panim, his face, his presence in Exodus 33 is quite puzzling. He says the reason why is because elsewhere in the Bible it says man cannot see God and live. And yet men see God and live. It's fascinating, isn't it? Page 3, he says, the term panim refers to the forefront of the divine extend. The imagery of the divine face found in Psalms also favors this motif of the identity between the Lord's face and his anthropomorphic form.